Hello, everyone. Welcome to the weekly SIG Compute meeting. You can find the agenda in the chat. I'll paste it again. And you're welcome to add yourself to the attendees or add anything to the agenda notes. I'll just repeat myself one more time about these important emails for every web owner. So yeah, I've explained it in like several places already, and I believe you're familiar with it. But if you're not, here are the links, and please have a look on those. Other than that, I see that the agenda is empty. So I can like throw an open offer for anyone to raise anything on their mind, and if not, we can just move to looking at the board and seeing what's the which webs need the most attention.
I wonder if I may. First,
Hey, how are you doing?
does it work? Can you hear me?
Yep, I can.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I wonder if it makes sense to talk briefly about the idea that Vladek and had earlier today about some sort of a compromise way how to expose experimental migration-related features in a sustainable way, especially since there are not that many, but few proposals that tend to generate ideas of new APIs, and it does feel kind of overwhelming, and many of these are experimental in a way that they may not necessarily make long-term sense. So we try to think about how to allow adding them with enough flexibility to maybe change them, remove them, turn them into something else quickly enough. I only had a short window to try to think about it, but generally, or Vladimir, if you would want to present it yourself, but I can try just to describe it the way I see that. Okay, let me try first. So I think it does make sense to try to override migration policies only, because that is the established mechanism to sort of customize the default behavior. And within the migration policies, where you usually just sort of change the current or cluster defaults, there would be a new section called experimental that would hold these completely unsupported experimental tunables that wouldn't have any guarantees behind them. They would be reasonably hidden away because it's not really exposed in the Kubernetes CR or anywhere else, really. Yet it would allow to experiment with these on a per VM basis, using the policies. And upon successful graduation of those features, we could then either remove them entirely or perhaps transition to another section called sort of advanced in the migration policies, where these things would be still hidden from the general users, but would allow a supported customization later on. One example of that would be the maximum allowed downtime, that I feel like it's something that needs to be configurable in the long run, but again, maybe not. I'm done. I don't know who was first. Please.
Lubo, I think it was you.
Thank you. So to me, you just described alpha features guarded by the feature gates that then either go to beta and GA or are done as deprecated and removal of everything which they guard. So have I missed anything, or?
Maybe I can just provide a bit more context here. Basically, the idea is that we have a discussion about which APIs we need to disclose and which we don't, and how to do that. The thing is that there is like a chicken and an egg problem here. because basically we're still not sure like which configuration we actually want to apply to migrations. What we would want to do is expose some low-level knobs in order for some of our users and partners to experiment with under alpha, and then completely revisit the API and like we have a debate about how to actually reflect the API, and like my stand is that we don't need to expose these low-level knobs because things differently. But the idea is that we somehow need to let users experiment with this before we come up to conclusions. So what we thought about is to expose these low-level knobs as alpha with the clear intention, written in advance in the web, that this API will be heavily revisited moving forward, and that we basically don't think this should. We're not convinced, let's say, that this should be the API in the final feature.
I would even add that perhaps this is it's actually two things. I think for the feature gate approach, it's an opportunity to maybe introduce only a single feature gate for something like experimental migration features, so that you don't have to have another 5 feature gates and deal with too many of them. And second, I think like the practice so far that Lubo, you said like you follow and all that, like I think there is a general dissatisfaction with how the migration API looks like today. And it did follow exactly that process. So maybe it really needs to be something else. Vladik.
Yeah, I think there's no disconnect. I think Lubo is generally right. This is a part of this process. It just here what we want to do is to take it to the right place. The right place, in my mind, this is the migration policies. The migration policies are in alpha. Here we can create a new struct, not by generalizing a behavior, but instead of explicitly saying, yes, this is the behavior that we want to achieve, we provide low-level tunables for now to experiment with, and then we'll continue from there. So this is just basically a place where we could continue the experiment.
So a couple of probably dump notes. If you get the feature gate, dedicated feature gate for these experiments, then you don't hold graduation of whatever based on it. So in this case, the migration policies. So the migration policies can go to beta without caring about these alpha experiments. So that's would be my recommendation, to still base them as a net new features, and yeah, they can be in the alpha API, but they have their own life cycle. Second of all, I think it's not straightforward, not just network policies, because at the end of the day, it's kind of network policies are kind of embedded into the VMI spec, right? So,
what network policies?
Migration policies.
Migration policies are not embedded in the VMI spec.
Are not?
Migration policies.
They have their own CRD with basically selectors and stuff to match to the right VMs, but it's completely outside of the VMI manifest.
But at the end of the day, you put every option to the VMI API, so the handler can send the information about the options to the launcher, or not? Am I missing anything?
But not in the VMI spec, right? This is in the migration options.
It's in the status, yes. Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be in the status. It's in the migration options that you're sending to the.
So
maybe it's in the interface between the launcher and the handler. We're passing migration options.
And from where the handler gets these options. I think today it gets them from the VMI. Or not?
I think that the handler tracks migration policies directly, if I'm not wrong. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Even if it's in the even if it's in the status, that's still for that part we need a feature gate, but I'm not sure if all of this is how does this trickle down. I don't remember.
Yeah, I can check that out. If this is a desired direction, I could take a look. I wanted to additionally ask about what you said about the feature gate. So would it make sense to all of you to have like a additional feature gate regarding just the experimental advanced section so that you could indeed graduate to beta the policies in general? Okay. And would you also be okay with having just a feature gate for the experimental features instead of having individual feature gates for every single change?
Yes, I think that a single alpha feature gate for everything that you want to expose is the right choice.
Okay. And with that, sorry.
Just a technical note. Just a technical note that if you put it into under one, then moving it forward, you need to move up all of them, right? Kind of.
I wouldn't think so. I think that like imagining a situation where again maybe the max downtime option is the good example. So let's say right now that's going to land in the experimental subtree, right? And when everybody feels it's a good idea to expose that even to the cluster admin, because that's like a major characteristic of how smoothly your migrations are going to be, then I would think that it just gets a entirely new API, maybe even at the Uber CR, and again, perhaps stay in the migration policy for overrides in the experimental section still.
So I think that if we are switching APIs, it would require most probably another alpha round. But it makes me think, like, is there a reason to have like an experimental field in migration policies? Can't we just add more fields and say that they are under a feature gate and then remove them? Is there a reason not to do that this way? So if we do choose to keep it around, we don't have to do any further changes. I'm not sure there's a reason not to do that.
To me, it felt really like a good idea to have an entire section that's by even by its name, signaling to everybody that it's not anything that we're supporting or obligated to keep around.
Sure, it just would demand like moving it around and maybe okay, but yeah, we can discuss it on that.
Another stupid idea, and this could be very stupid, is to have an NRI plugin that would just inject environment variable with things to override in the guest. To things to override in the pod. The migration would take the virt launcher code will take it from that environment variable that would be injected by NRI or something else. And then there's no need for API. There's no need for anything. It's just the problem here is to deploy the NRI, and it's less visible.
I'm wondering if, I mean, again, up to you, but I wouldn't.
No, I know it's the management of this is not great.
Yes,
just a good idea, but
and I still would envision that some of these parameters would still turn into, when it matures, right? They would turn into advanced configurables that you still want to hide good enough, but you don't want to make it virtually impossible for people to change.
Barak, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wonder if this can be somehow achieved by mutating webhook, change the launcher port somehow. But I'm not really sure. I have philosophy.
Yeah, there's nothing to mutate. No, I mean, there's no parameter at the moment on the VMI to mutate or on the pod to mutate. The only thing, you could be right about if this is a, there could be a mutating policy that just modifies the pod and exposing an environment variable, and then Vert Launcher reads from that environment variable. That could be,
Yeah, something like this. But then we would have to change the launcher port to know about it. But
there
I'm
could
not
be
really
an
sure.
no, there could be an interesting angle.
I mean, there's all sorts of way how to make it like again, there could be some obscure annotation somewhere. It could be
No, annotation is an API.
Yeah, I know. But it could be, or yeah, as Fabian suggested, or the extra parameters on the command line of Word Launcher or Virland or whatever. I think there's all sorts of ways how to do that, but I really wonder if the migration policies experimental or advanced section is by far like also if you think about how to actually do this in practice, like all of these manipulations with the webhooks or with the environmental variables and all that, they get quite complex in downstream products where you have things prescribed and deployed in certain way, and it's not so trivial to change things.
I'm not against an API on the migration policies spec. I'm quite for it.
Do you think it requires another VP?
No, why another VP? I
I
think
mean,
it's
as a concept, I mean, because as we sort of agreed, like there would be another feature gate just for the experimental section. So something to say like, all right, we want to have experimental section, we want to have a separate feature gate for that. And again, maybe a place where to again reinforce that it's an unsupported experimental stuff. I don't know. I mean, I don't care. I could squeeze it in the existing VPs, and I guess Asif can do the same.
So I just want to say something about the API. I think the project is not supposed to accept APIs that are in the beginning in the thought of experimental. It's not. It's like you want to accept APIs that you think it will work. Maybe they will not work, but you think it will work. You don't want it to kill it between alphas. You don't want to kill it between alpha and beta. You may kill it because you find out something new. But in advance that you want to experiment that's like a hook point. So use a hook point like the ones that were expressed here. If you, just to make it clear, once you expose an API, it will stay there in the structs forever, even if you drop it in the end. You cannot delete it. You cannot delete it from the struct. You can delete it from the APIs. You can delete it from the documentation, from everywhere. But you will be left with that one forever because of how the database is kept in general. So
no. I think this is not the right assumption because
this is how it is. Most of all of our features, all of our fields are like that. Because the reason is simple. I think we spoke about it many times. You put a field, if you now you have it in alpha, and then tomorrow you delete it, right? And in 3 versions, someone else introduces it again, and someone had that field before with a manifest from that experiment time. So it will cause you a lot of pain. And
but
that's
where's
it. What?
We did this already. We had the live migration, live update features. Is this right? Jed knows more.
Yeah, but this is correct, but it was requested not to do that, and this is how Kubernetes did it for a long time, unless they changed their policies. And
No,
that was because of this thing that we persist. It was persisted in etcd, and when you put the manifest in the future, when it is reintroduced, you may collide.
I mean, to me, this is completely surprising. I remember us talking about this many times before, and as I remember it, the conclusion was that in alpha stage we can remove anything, and we can introduce APIs freely and then remove them without caring. So I don't know. Maybe I
Yeah, you can.
misunderstood.
It's formal. You can remove it in front of the. You don't have a contract with the users. That's correct. But you have a contract with your the fact that you polluted your API internally.
But Eddie, here the graduation would mean that yes, all right, you remove it, right? But you introduce it somewhere else, or you don't introduce it at all, right? So it's where do you see the issue?
So the story is simple. Usually, the story is you introduce now a field called foo, right? And now you tried it out, a version, and it was used in someone used it because he tried it out, right? And then you said, okay, I don't want it anymore. So you remove it. So you have two options. You can remove it from the completely, like you even remove the struct and from the schema, you remove it from completely from the struct in Go, and then it was like it was never there, right? Okay, so now in 2 or 3 versions, someone else has a new idea and introduces foo again, the same name. So he adds it. He doesn't know that it was taken before, so he adds it there, and then it's if someone had that manifest, that all manifest, someone then it will be interpreted wrongly. That's it.
I do think that like exactly this way to kind of hide it under a experimental section kind of helps a lot with this because it's really like all these possibilities that there's a new option here, new variable there. Like it's confined within that experimental thing. And it's so you don't have when you're creating this new one 3 years later, there's no need for you to kind of recycle the name or anything, right? Because it's like experimental whatever. It doesn't as long all right. If this is true, and I see people are thinking maybe not, then nothing really prevents you to force creating foo 2 and foo 3 and whatever, right? Because it's meaningless. It's hidden under a completely experimental section.
I just wanted to say another small note that we initially thought to do that with KubeVirt plugins, but it was more complicated than we thought because we can't express most of that inside the XML itself. It's like parameters, spread all around the code basically. So yeah, I just want to say that. Ali, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to break the tie about the API fields that are introduced in alpha. I think there was a discussion about this in either SIG API machinery or API reviews. And I remember Edward was involved as well. So we should go back, find that, and link it here. I think that will be helpful. But my understanding was that the alpha flag can protect users in the sense that they would do this pollution in clusters that are ephemeral and that are not supposed to be a production clusters, right? So you've used the alpha field, you've tried it out, it's in etcd, but then that cluster is supposed to be ephemeral. That is how alpha fields, in my opinion, help in experimenting at the same time protecting the pollution of etcd. But then if this is done in a long-lived cluster where the same alpha field that was introduced will get upgraded and then you are supposed to support both the older alpha field as well as the newer upgraded field, then that's where it will get messy, and there is no good way to do that. That was my impression of the last discussion we had with one of the Kubernetes SIGs.
I find it extremely surprising because this way you cannot do anything. You cannot introduce any API. You cannot experiment with API. Even the API that you introduced and it didn't work, you just fall back, delete it, and then it means that even if you introduced it in alpha, it means that it cannot you cannot remove it because most of our users are they don't have ephemeral clusters.
Oh, ephemeral can be like staging, for example. You're not, if you agree that it's on staging and you never persist the manifest, that's like an agreement.
You deliver a product to customers with alpha features already in the manifest.
No, so you should block it. That's what, if I understand correctly, are I saying if you make sure that the alpha fields are not usable for them, then you're safe.
Let other people speak. As if you were next. As if.
Sorry, I forgot to hit the unmute button. So yeah, sorry, I joined like 5-10 minutes late, so I'm sorry if I'm repeating anything. But when Mikhail and I had this discussion, I remember he was talking about using a annotation and supplying a JSON body with the temporary APIs you want to test with through that. Did we not discuss that? So that way it's not exposed to the user at all. And the motivation was that sometimes whenever you have a algorithm, the algorithm has certain hyperparameters and you don't really know how to tune them for end user workloads because you don't know what the end users are using. So if you want to test on their workload, maybe you supply them, tell them how to use this custom annotation to play around on their proprietary workload or whatever.
Annotations are API, so I mean.
But
I find it even worse.
The JSON and the fields you supply in that, they aren't really exposed through the like the Kubernetes API where like it literally tells you this is what's available. Like those are hidden options essentially. You need to know the implementation details to know what to supply, if I understand correctly.
Yes, it was supposed to be a sort of a shortcut, or let's say, again, API-less introduction of these things, because this has been done before for other experimental things before. But I have to say I do like the migration policies experimental section better because it is cleaner, first, and second, it is a step towards keeping some of these as advanced configuration in my mind as a proper API. Again, not in that exact place, but it does look to me a lot better, really.
Yeah, so for just to address the API-less modifications, I think a mutation webhook, as Barak suggested, would be even better to just introduce an environment variable into the relevant pod, and then Vert Launcher will read it, and that would be even better and safer, or an RI plugin. But I also agree that just in general, a targeted migration policy sounds, in my head, and I'm biased, very reasonable to me.
Just a real quick question, and I like the experimental field, but Ed and Ale, like the issue that you're talking about, is that not addressed by the Kube storage version migrator that runs and basically rewrites the object's representation in etcd when you change the storage version? Like, I thought that was the entire point of that project, was to avoid this pitfall.
I am not sure about that. The storage version migrator that I was aware of that dealt with HCD, some kind of HCD key encryption that needs to be migrated once the keys or once the encryption keys are refreshed. But maybe I'm getting confused here. There might be a different migrator, but I do know that all the core APIs, they have an internal version that they use, and you can add a new field and then migrate the old field to the new one through the API jumps. But still, I think that is not available for CRDs. That's only for the core API.
Yeah, so for CRDs, this is like the documented way of bumping up your storage version. And as far as I was aware, it goes in and rewrites the object's representation. So yeah, if you have got an experimental field that you've dropped from alpha to beta and you move to beta, that shouldn't be present in etcd anymore. That's my understanding, and that's we use it downstream for OpenShift. It's obviously not a just a vanilla thing upstream with Kubernetes, but yeah, my understanding was that fields like that would get cleaned up. So if that does do that and that removes that kind of concern, then I think the experimental field is something to look at in alpha, and we can potentially drop it then moving forward.
Yeah, if this is proven, then it makes sense. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, we're over time, so we have to wrap it up. But I think that this is an extremely important discussion. If somebody wants to pick it up, I think that having like a documentation on somewhere, like describing what we can and cannot do with alpha fields is super important. With proofs, pointing out for how Kubernetes is doing it and stuff like that. So, yeah, if somebody wants to do that, it would be highly appreciated.
We have a SIG control plane for these things.
And by the way, if someone wants, then you can just go to the pod types, and you can check there all the deprecated fields that were removed, and you will see them, like most of them. You just look for deprecated. Everything is there.
All right. Okay, so I think we have to wrap up. So thank you, everyone, and yeah, see you next week. Bye-bye.